меня, короче, казус. Ситуация интересная, да? Да. Какое ощущение идет? Да, стоит ну нет. Наверное, там по-своему, как вы понимаете. Непонятно. Спасибо. Ну я тогда уберу все штаги. Мешает мне нифига. Наоборот, да. Наоборот тогда, да. Наоборот, и подальше. Да, сегодня закопан надо сказать. Лагает вообще. Да.
Do you write code that
line with speed.
Hey everybody, Noah Kelman here, and welcome to my channel about modern jazz piano. Today I want to do something kind of interesting and talk to you about mental practice techniques. So as someone who has gone through a lot of different injuries, and actually I'm dealing with a bit of an injury right now, one of the things I'm doing is spending a lot of time practicing away from the piano. And it's funny because every time I'm feeling amazing physically and I spend even hours a day at the piano, I start to actually forget just how much progress you make away from the piano, and in some cases you can actually make more progress, right? So I want to show you some of the techniques that I actually use to really improve my playing without ever playing a note or even sitting down in front of a keyboard. In fact, these are so essential that I would very highly recommend you practice regardless of whether or not you are feeling physically and technically fit in your hands, right? These techniques have helped me personally, I think, build my ears so far, and I would not trade my time working on these mental techniques for anything. So without further ado, let's check this out. So one of the things I like to work on is taking a really tricky progression, something that I can't quite hear yet, and basically learning to improvise over it in my head. So what if we take something like giant steps, for example? So this is a really tricky one, right? We got B major to B7 to G major to B flat 7 to E flat major. Wow, okay. So one thing I will actually do, sometimes I'll start by just playing a bass note on the piano and actually singing an improvisation in my head. I'll try to sing this out loud for you, even though it's going to be painful. But normally I would do this in my head. And if I got stuck, I would stop. So you'll actually be able to notice in your head, are you really hearing what's happening? And if the answer is no, then I highly recommend that you simply stop and start again. So you can start, again, this is step one. You start with the bass note in your left hand and do this in your head. But then, step two is we're going to get rid of that bass note in the left hand and see if we can really hear the progression in our head as well. So. Wow, okay. So, sorry about that. Sorry that you have to listen to that. Normally I would just do this completely in my head, but I want you, of course, to hear what I'm hearing. So let's say I couldn't get these first two chords. So I close my eyes and try to really formulate some lines. So alright, so that was very arpeggiated. Let's see if we can form something a little bit more bebop oriented here, a little more chromatic. Alright, cool. So you can hear how the gears are kind of turning. Now, I might not have been able to do this as fast at first, right? So I might have to really figure out some of these lines in my head, sing them over and over until I've got it. So. Alright, so that is the process, right? It can be really painful and tedious, but this is how we do it. Now, once you can go through the whole song and do this comfortably, your next step is, I don't even want you playing a bass note in your left hand. I want you to actually just get into your head. First of all, you can start by just singing the progression. So we start with the first note. So you see I got a little tripped up there. I'm pretty sure I did the rest right, just singing the bass notes in my head, right? And I think I could still do that a little better than I did there, but you get the point. So you want to really be able to visualize the notes in your head, and you can actually check yourself with this. So, right, and just kind of go like that and so on. So if you're trying to learn a tricky tune, in my opinion, doing things this way is going to take you there much faster than simply playing it on the piano. Playing it on the piano, you're going to get away with cheating a little bit, cheating your ears. You're probably going to be playing things you're not really hearing. Doing it this way is going to ensure that aggression. You can't cheat when you're in your head, right? You're going to get mixed up. So once you've got that in your head, now I want you to actually be improvising in your head. All right, so let's give this a shot completely in the head. I'm going to just use a starting pitch. So let's see. There, I visualized myself landing on a D. I was a little flat, but yeah, landed on a D. Okay, let's try starting at the next part of the progression on a G. So that should be a B flat. I think I sang it a little flat. Cool, there we go. Alright, cool. So I was able to know exactly where I was in my head and even know where I landed and check myself. So if you can actually do this, by the way, again, I would not sing this out loud normally. I would actually just do this in my head. But if you can do that, check against yourself and be like, cool, I am nailing these changes in my head, then you know now you're ready to truly sit down at the piano and start improvising. Now you can do this kind of visual practice not just with lines, but even with chords. So, a few videos ago I talked about singing up a chord, right? So if we have this chord, you have to go 1, flat, 7, 3, ouch, right? Be able to actually sing up it that way. Well, you could do the same thing. You could do the same thing in your head, right? Without ever being at the piano, you could actually learn voicings and even comp, right? And start to actually see and hear voicings in your head. So these are some of my favorite practice techniques because I might be walking around, I might be on the move, I might be in the car, I might be walking around a store, and I can actually practice a song in my head. So you would not believe, right? They talk about 10,000 hours, right? To truly master something, you need 10,000 hours of practice. Well, in my opinion, if you are doing this in your head, that time actually counts toward those 10,000 hours. You are totally building up your ears. So I highly recommend you do this type of mental practice as much as you possibly can, and it is going to speed up your progress to a point where you won't even believe it. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson on mental practice. It's something that I have done for many, many years, and I think it's helped me immensely, so highly recommend you check it out. And if you do try it out, please let me know how you do with it in the comments. Also, if you're someone who would like some help actually formulating a personalized plan for you, feel free to click the link in the description to set up a free strategy call with either myself or one of my teammates, and we can talk about what the
Не важно, ну пока так, да, у нас себе так говорят. Это тоже так, да? Зачем это мне? Это наоборот, да, вот это себе. Хорошо сказал сейчас. А, это что ли? Вот это он нет. Наоборот, ну это он о себе так говорит, значит, да. Ну наоборот, да наоборот, значит, ну нет, ну наоборот.
When it comes to smartphones, there are a few aspects that age quickly and a few that don't. You've got things like processing power, you've got things like cameras. They're improving so fast each year that some mid-range devices can make mincemeat of flagships from just a few years ago. But then you've got materials, the quality of the display, and subtler things like how good the vibration motor is. And it's in these aspects that all the flagship smartphones come out on top versus cheaper, newer ones. Those phones may look just as good on a spec sheet, but they'll feel nothing alike when you pick them up. Enter the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus, a phone that is recent enough that it still comes out on top in terms of power and cameras, but is now old enough that you're getting those premium quality materials for not a huge amount of money. But how much? If you're really keen on getting one brand new, you're looking at somewhere between $450 and $500. But things When it comes to smartphones, there are a few aspects that age quickly and a few that don't. You've got things like processing power, you've got things like cameras. They're improving so fast each year that some mid-range devices can make mincemeat of flagships from just a few years ago. But then you've got materials, the quality of the display, and subtler things like how good the vibration motor is. And it's in these aspects that older flagship smartphones come out on top versus cheaper, newer ones. Those phones may look just as good on a spec sheet, but they'll feel nothing alike when you pick them up. Enter the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus, a phone that is recent enough that it still comes out on top in terms of power and cameras, but is now old enough that you're getting those premium quality materials for not a huge amount of money. But how much? If you're really keen on getting one brand new, you're looking at somewhere between $450 and $500. But things get really interesting when you start looking at the refurbished options. You can get the S9 Plus for about $330, the standard S9 for about $280, and then, if you're willing to accept one in worse condition, as low as $199. Alright, late last year, Dave2D made a video about how this was a brilliant phone for $500, and since then the phone has become not just even cheaper, but even better. Take a listen to this. When the S9 Plus launched, it got good reviews. It was a great but unsurprising upgrade, with a 4 to 5 star rating across the board. The main complaints were that it's expensive considering it's an iterative upgrade, AR emojis kinda sucked, and it had a software skin that felt sluggish. So, fast forward a year, and whilst AR emoji continues to make me look like I should really get some help, the phone's other two weaknesses have been more than just fixed. We've had One UI, which has massively boosted performance. You'll notice it when you're flicking through your recent apps, or changing the modes of the camera. We've got a night mode, which is not just a fresh coat of paint, but saves battery too. And this new material design brings the phone more in line with Google's own way Samsung's previous Space Age theme looked, but One UI has kind of turned that negative to a positive. There have also been subtler upgrades. Samsung has tweaked the front camera to allow it to better expose your face, and it now lets you, like the S10, adjust the field of view when taking selfies. They've also added in the same scene detection algorithm you get on the newer phones. Another example of a cool new feature that comes with this Android 9 upgrade is, say for example you've turned off auto rotate because you usually use your phone in portrait, but then for one particular task you wanted to use landscape. You now get given this little indicator in the corner that lets you temporarily switch orientation. The point being that, compared to the original Samsung Experience skin that the phone launched with, there has just been a whole load of quality of life improvements. When it comes to flagship smartphone pricing, and there are exceptions, but this is what tends to happen. The phone launches, and for at least a month it's almost impossible to get it below the launch price. Then a couple of deals and discounts start coming in. You might be able to get 10% off. We see the most significant drops though when new phones come out from the same company. And so the S9 Plus saw one drop when the Note 9 came out, roughly 6 months in. And then another when the S10 came out, in total 1 year later. After this point, once the phone has been effectively replaced, whilst it will continue to fall in price, the rate at which it falls will be lower. Long story short, right now is a sweet spot. Right now, this phone makes sense. At close to $350, the kinds of phones you could alternatively buy this year if you wanted brand new are things like the Huawei P30 Lite, the Red Magic Mars, or the Xiaomi Mi 9 SE. And those are all good phones, but you'll struggle to find devices that have IP68 water resistance, phones that can do wireless charging, phones with dual speaker setups, or even just a camera that is this consistently good. Don't get me wrong, there are reasons why you might want to buy a newer, cheaper phone as opposed to a maybe used flagship, but performance is not one of them. A top-end chip from last year is still going to massively outperform any kind of current mid-range chip. If you're a gamer, then game on this phone than them. You might have seen my video on the best smartphones of 2019 so far, where I mentioned that this smartphone is a better buy than the Galaxy Note 9. And to clarify, the Note 9 is similar to the S9 Plus but with a noticeably larger battery. It's a better phone all round, but the thing is, I couldn't find one for less than about $500. And so the takeaway is, if you can find an amazing deal on it, then it's worth going for. But from what I've seen, the S9 is consistently better bang for your buck. Right now, at least. And yeah, this video shouldn't take away from the appeal of the S10 phones either. They are a massive improvement in not just performance and battery, but design. You pretty much lose the bezels and you get an even better display. But they're expensive, twice the price, and so are really for a different type of consumer. If you can spring for that, I'd recommend it, but if you can't, then I'd pay attention to the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus. If you enjoyed this video, it'd be massively appreciated if you could subscribe to the channel. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Всем привет, меня зовут Евгений Шевченко и сообщество Первый лад с коротким обращением. Осталось уже меньше 2 дней распродажи в честь начала нового учебного года. Каждый день мы открывали для вас новые тематические предложения наших курсов, и теперь настал тот миг, когда они открыты вообще все. И это прекрасная возможность для вас подобрать курсы, которые нравятся лично вам, со скидками до 75%. Нажимайте на кнопку под видео, чтобы узнать все подробности нашей распродажи, пока у вас еще есть время на это. Спасибо за внимание, всем пока!
В играх серии Сталкер артефактам отведена большая роль. Это таинственное образование, которое порождается аномалиями. И именно за ними большинство сталкеров отправляется в зону, надеясь заработать на продаже артефактов большие деньги. Однако вы можете заметить, что сталкеры почти никогда не трогают артефакты своими руками. А от всех найденных артов они стараются как можно быстрее избавляться и продавать, и даже почти никогда не носят их в своем рюкзаке. В данном видео вы узнаете, почему сталкеры так не любят лишний раз прикасаться к артефактам. Но для начала давайте ответим на вопрос, что такое артефакты? Артефакты — это еще до конца не изученное аномальное образование. Иногда под действием разный мусор, предметы, частички плоти или прочее могут деформироваться и полностью менять свои физические и химические факты. Почти каждый артефакт в игре имеет свои уникальные свойства и способен влиять на человеческий организм, улучшая какие-то его характеристики. И это влияние на организм может быть как и благотворным, так еще и вредоносным. Влияние артефактов на организм человека. Когда артефакт попадает в руки или близкий контакт с человеком, он сразу начинает влиять на клетки организма сталкера, тем самым потихоньку мутируя его. Например, некоторые артефакты электрической природы, такие как батарейка или пустышка, положительно влияют на мышечный тонус и общее самочувствие человека. Во время ношения он чувствует прилив энергии и сил, улучшение настроения и мотивации, а также учащается сердцебиение, потребление кислорода в воздухе, улучшение мышечного тонуса и даже развитие сухожилий и дополнительных мышечных волокон. И явно же пример таких мутаций — это монстр Снорк. А как другие, уже более мощные артефакты способны влиять и мутировать на организм человека, вы узнаете после короткой рекламы. Free Fire — это бесплатная королевская битва для iOS и Android с мощной кастомизацией. На большой остров высаживаются 50 игроков, но победитель всего один — это последний выживший. В твоем распоряжении десятки видов холодного огнестрельного оружия, транспорта и огромные игры, эксклюзивных трек, персонажу Тиму вместе. Артефакты по типу колобка и маминых волос из тени Чернобыля улучшают защитные характеристики персонажа, делая кожу намного грубее и защищая от пули порезов. Клетки человека под воздействием этих артефактов начинают ускоренно делиться, создавая более плотный кожаный волосяной покров на теле. Кожа во время воздействия этого артефакта грубеет настолько, что даже острые ножи с трудом способны ее разрезать. Точно таким же плотным кожаным покровом обладают и некоторые мутанты, такие как, например, псевдогиганты, химеры или контролеры. Кожа этих монстров настолько грубая, что даже автоматные пули едва пробивают ее. Артефакты псионической природы по типу лунного света или оленькового цветочка напрямую влияют на психику и мозг человека. Они ускоряют активность клеток головного мозга, тем самым улучшая способность человека противостоять пси-излучению, а также из побочных эффектов они могут быть образы в голове, паранойю или даже навязчивые желания. Так, например, еще до конца неизученный артефакт аленький цветочек из чистого неба вызывал у женщин резкое желание познакомиться с владельцем данного артефакта. Некоторые мутанты, такие как пси-собака или контролер, обладают подобной очень развитой психикой и могут даже влиять и подчинять себе рассудок других существ. Артефакты, ускоряющие заживление ран, такие как глаз, пламя и другие, действуют в первую очередь на метаболизм человека, в несколько раз ускоряя его. А очень быстрый обмен веществ влечет за собой следующие негативные последствия. Постоянное чувство голода, уменьшение процента жира в организме, худоба, четко видимые вены на теле, а также раздражительность и агрессивность. Кстати, симптомы в точь-в-точь описывают некоторых мутантов зоны по типу излома или псевдособак. Полная же противоположность этим артефактам — это артефакты класса колючка. Все виды колючек выводят радиацию из организма, но выводят ее самым естественным путем, через кровь. При ношении подобных артефактов у владельца начинаются проблемы с кровеносным давлением. Сразу же начинает идти кровь из носа, из ушей и рта, а при наличии ран кровь начинает быстро сочиться уже через них. Все это ведет к тому, что у владельца просто не заживают раны, и он вынужден ходить с огромными порезами и рассечениями кожи, которые все никак не затягиваются. Подобный эффект вы можете заметить практически у всех мутантов зоны. У слепых псов, например, проглядываются огромные незаживающие раны на полтела. Никогда не затягивается также поврежденная кожа у сторков, а у кровососов вообще мозги из головы торчат, а о чем тут говорить? Естественно, что все эти мутации влияют не только на самого человека, но еще и на его потомство. Так, например, артефакт колобок активно изменяет и переписывает генетический код владельца, что практически не сказывается на самом человеке, но и от непредсказуемых сталкеров редко, когда рождаются здоровые дети. И эта тема, кстати, была более раскрыта в книге «Пикник на обочине». Там у детей сталкеров всегда имелись какие-то разные странные мутации. В чистом небе из его перипетии есть даже артефакт, принцип действия которого не изучен вообще наукой. Это светляк. Светляк предназначен для восстановления здоровья игрока, однако же по канону он способен всего за пару минут вылечить уже умирающего человека. Но как он это делает, ученым пока неизвестно. Известно лишь то, что он взаимодействует с какими-то неизученными наукой полями, и это изучение может запросто запрограммировать клетки организма на выздоровление. Артефакты во вселенной сталкера еще почти не изучены учеными и официальной наукой. Однако всем опытным сталкерам известно, что каждый артефакт по-своему влияет на организм человека, и даже недолгое ношение любого артефакта близко к телу может привести к очень сильным и странным мутациям. Именно поэтому сталкеры стараются лишний раз не трогать и не носить артефакты, и сразу продавать их после находки.
I'm Nick Nimmin, and I'm a StreamYard user. For the last 6 years, I've been live streaming consistently to YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else on the internet that would have me. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to use pretty much all the live streaming software that's available. Once I discovered StreamYard and found how easy it is, I was sold right out of the gate.
Сотрудники для тех, кто развивает бизнес. Для тех, кому важна скорость найма. Для тех, кто ценит просто...
Наоборот, наоборот, мне же это не надо, в принципе, это делать. Ну, посмотри. Ну, надо совет подключить там.
Welcome back to Hardware Box. Today I'm updating my top 5 best CPU list, and although I updated it just 4 months ago now, a lot has changed since then. We've had the release of Intel's new 11th Gen Core series, and perhaps more importantly, they slashed prices of the previous 10th Gen series. Meanwhile, AMD has continued to struggle with supply, and with none of those highly anticipated Non-X Zen 3 processors in sight, they're competing pretty poorly in terms of value right now, especially with those discounted 10th gen parts that I mentioned a moment ago. Still, despite all of that, their sales haven't really been affected that much, at least as far as we can tell. Anyway, there's a lot to go over, so let's get into it. And as usual, I'll start with the most affordable options and then work our way up. Historically, the best value entry-level CPUs have cost around $100 US, and that's still mostly true today, though, of course, as with all things in 2021, pricing can be a bit screwy. Take our current and previous pick for this category, pricing of the Intel Core i3-10100, it can vary quite drastically. It's still possible to find it in stock for around $125 US, which is why I'm still recommending it, but a lot of retailers have it for around $150 to $170 US, and at that price I don't recommend it. And then the F SKU, which should be cheaper, makes no sense because the best pricing I could find for it was $145 US. The pricing of the 10100 really is all over the place. At B&H, for example, they have it in stock for $125 US, but prices at Newegg.com start at $160 US with a third-party seller, and then $170 US over at Amazon. At these prices, as I said, you're basically knocking on the door of Core i5 parts, and at that point the 10100 should be $150 to $170 US, and at that price I don't recommend it. And then the F SKU, which should be cheaper, makes no sense because the best pricing I could find for it was $145 US. The pricing of the 10100 really is all over the place. At B&H, for example, they have it in stock for $125 US, but prices at Newegg.com start at $160 US with a third-party seller, and then $170 US over at Amazon. At these prices, as I said, you're basically knocking on the door of Core i5 parts, and at that point the 10100 makes no sense. So if you can land the 10100 for under $130 US, then I think it's a good value option. Above that though, you should start considering something like the Core i5-10400. An alternative option at this price point would be the Ryzen 3 3200G, though it is only a 4-core 4-thread part, and at $130 US it's not super compelling and certainly not as good as the Core i3-10100. But in the absence of the Core i3 part, this really is one of the best CPUs priced near $100 US. There's also the 4-core 8-thread Ryzen 5 3400G, but it's currently out of stock ever I checked. But at around $170 US, you'd again be better off with a 10th gen Core i5 part, which we'll look at in a moment. The same applies for the Ryzen 5 1600 at $175 US, and the Ryzen 5 3500X at $190 US. As for the Ryzen 5 3200G, the only advantage it enjoys over the Core i3-10100 is the AM4 upgrade path. That is assuming you buy a decent quality board that can handle the higher core count parts. Other than that, strapping the Core i3-10100 on a new B560 board looks like the way to go for budget shoppers. Back in January, the Ryzen 5 3600 was once again my pick for the best value all-rounder, and this has been the case dating back to 2019. I noted that a good alternative and a close runner-up was the Intel Core i5-10400F, but acknowledged that it was a bit let down by motherboard prices and, of course, the need for a Z-series board if you wish to run at memory speeds above DDR4 2666. Since then, the 10400F has plummeted in price from around $180 US to $150 US, while the Ryzen 5 3600 has gone up to $220, at least when you can find it. So the 10400F is the obvious choice of the two, at least when you can find it. So the 10400F is the obvious choice of the two, but sadly it's no longer in stock either, at least for retailers who are selling it at $150. Those who have stock are asking between $180 and $200 US, and at that point you might as well just look at the new 11400 series. As it stands, the Core i5 11400F can be had for $175 US, while the standard version with the integrated graphics is just $10 more. So that's less than the $190 US you'll pay for the Ryzen 5 2600, $220 that you'll pay for the 3600, or $300 that you'll pay for the 5600X, if you can find it. When compared to the $1,000, the Ryzen 5 2600, $220 that you'll pay for the 3600, or $300 that you'll pay for the 5600X, if you can find it. When compared to the 10400F, the 11400F benefits from better memory support. DDR4 3200 is now the stock configuration, though it doesn't really matter given The cheaper B560 boards now support memory overclocking. You also get 20 PCI Express lanes from the CPU, whereas the 10th gen core parts only means the newer CPUs can connect directly to your primary M.2 storage device for even greater performance. Now, Intel motherboards might be around $20 to $30 more, but that's offset by the cheaper CPU pricing. Not to mention the 11400F is faster than the Ryzen 5 3600 across the board, particularly when looking at gaming performance, and that makes it the obvious choice in my opinion. The best high-end gaming CPU pick. This one's been largely dominated by Intel over the years, though the potential for that to change with Zen 3 was certainly real, but has yet to eventuate due to the TSMC 7nm supply constraints. As a result, AMD's 8-core 16-thread Zen 3 part, the 5800X, is coming in at $450 US, and while it is in stock right now, at least at the time of making this video, it's not particularly competitive at that price point. That's because Intel's flogging off their previous generation 8-core 16-thread CPUs for under $300 US. The Core i7 107